Wow, what an awesome turnout. It's good. The more Jews come together, the better it is. Just generally speaking, you know, it's always good. We're always very happy when everyone comes together. Obviously, the more unity we have, especially during this time period, we actually correct the sin of sinat chinam, which is essentially baseless hatred. So the more unity, the more we're connected with one another, the more we're complementary of one another. What we're doing is we're essentially undoing what was being done, which is essentially baseless hatred. Sometimes I heard this question, and I get this asked questions. Hey, can we do different types of get-togethers during this time period, during the 9 days? And I say, look, you can't really have music. You should avoid eating meat. But if you get together with your friends, if you get together with people, maybe someone that you're not as close with, maybe have an issue, that's probably the most ideal, because what you're doing is you're correcting the mistake of the past, right? You're not looking at someone who's saying, I can't stand this person. You're trying to correct that. You're trying to essentially remove any of the animosity that's within your heart, and you're trying to increase in the love that you have for one another. So that's actually, there's nothing wrong with doing that. There's nothing wrong with connecting with friends, especially this time period, and those around you that maybe there was issues in the past. You
could eat meat, right? But not after 8. Like, is that? Or
9 days. The 9 days, or you're not supposed to be eating meat or drinking wine for the 9 days essentially. You're not supposed to. On Rosh Chodesh Av, one can be lenient. On the first day of the month, one can be eat meat. When can you actually eat meat? On Shabbat itself, you can eat meat. If you have leftovers from Shabbat, that you can also eat. That Shabbat food, I feel like there's probably the expiration date for Shabbat food is probably like Wednesday or Thursday. It's just so good. There's like something special in there. You can go. When you come home late and there's like it's a Tuesday or when there's some food left from Shabbat, I would definitely eat it. It tastes just as good, if not better sometimes. Yeah.
So is this legal if I buy extra food on Shabbat and make it leftovers?
I would say you could listen. What I would say is enjoy the Shabbat, buy meat, enjoy it. At the end of the day, just don't overly do it. Do what you gotta do, but don't overly do it. Don't make it obvious. So don't pack your entire cart with 50, 60 pounds of meat. You know what I'm saying? And cook it. That seems to be a bit much. But honestly, it's just a few days. I think we'll manage without meat, just a few days. And plus we have a break in between. We have Shabbat, so it's not the end of the world. And then we can, after Tisha B'Av, we can have the meat. Okay, so I usually speak about parasha. I don't intend speaking about it. It might come up, we'll see. Usually parasha is very much consistent with current events. But there is a Gemara that I want to talk about, and that I think requires some explanation. The Gemara tells us in Masechet Shabbat that it gives us a few reasons why the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. So, in giving us a few reasons, we know the classic number one reason is sinat chinam, baseless hatred. And then it gives us other reasons. Another reason it provides us is, and it does this across different Gemarot, is the fact that we didn't act beyond the letter of the law. What does that mean? We didn't act beyond the letter of the law. Let's assume you found something, and since you found something, maybe it's in a public domain, and you can, the person lost hope. Essentially, they're not gonna want it back. But you go out of your way, maybe a phone or something, whatever it is. You say, no, I gotta track down this person. I gotta make sure I give him the phone. You're going beyond the letter of the law, right? You're not motivated by. What you're really motivated is by doing the right thing. I gotta find this and return it to the other person. So that's what it means, that during that time period, everything we did was just based on the technicality of the law. And that's what we had to do. So that's one of the reasons why it was destroyed. But then the Gemara gives us a very interesting reason. And that is, and it's towards the end of Masechet Shabbat, it says that we did not criticize one another. I mean, last time I checked, if you're going to typically, assuming it's not someone that loves you or your parents, because obviously our parents are be the ones who are probably going to be criticized us the most and expect the most of us, but typically, if you're going to criticize someone, doesn't mean you're a big fan of them to begin with. So we're gonna try to understand today, what does it mean that just because we didn't criticize one another, because the Gemara is not talking about loved ones per se, close family friendships, or it means the Jews themselves did not criticize one another. What does that mean? If I criticize somebody, it's very likely that I have an issue with that person. For the most part, we tend to criticize people we have a problem with. That's how it is, we perceive it as such. So what is the Gemara talking about that we didn't criticize each other? We're trying to understand what that actually means. Now, I would love to hear answers from the crowd on this question. How would you guys typically want to criticize somebody?
Constructively.
Constructively. Okay, that's a good answer. What else? Give me some answers. Like, how would you guys want to, if you want to criticize someone, right? You want to give them your peace of mind, your 2 cents. How would you do it?
I talk to them like they're like a dog.
You talking to them?
Yeah.
Okay. That's I've seen that before. You know, you wouldn't be the first. You definitely would not be the first.
With humility and compassion.
Okay, humility and compassion. Can you tell me more about that?
I think that you always have to see 2 sides of the spectrum, and I also think you have to see yourself in a situation like if you were on the other end, if you were in a circumstance like that you're criticizing, how would you be and how would you react? And then you have to take yourself out of the picture, but you also have to put yourself in the picture, if that makes any sense.
So what I'm understanding from you is you're saying like this: if you're gonna go criticize somebody, how would you want to be criticized? In a nutshell, right? Essentially, like, how would you, if let's say you're doing something wrong and you're not aware that you're doing something wrong, how would you want to be criticized? How would you want someone to help you become aware of your shortcoming? I 100%. It is very much subjective to the person, but there's a common denominator for sure. You'll see where I'm getting this. Yeah.
See somebody doing exactly what they're doing, criticize the other person to this person, then they'll realize, oh, I'm doing something wrong and I do that also. Or you can criticize yourself.
Okay, that's a degree of projection there for sure.
There's also timing,
Oh, for sure.
meaning like
That's huge. Timing is huge.
if someone made a play and asks you, oh, what did you think about the play? It's not your place to say what you really think. It's just I enjoyed watching, and then maybe 3 days later you can tell me the truth.
Okay, so
So
timing.
we thought.
If we're being honest, yeah.
I want them to be honest with me. Like, I want them to tell me straight up. Like, this is like, I don't like this, or like, shouldn't be like that. And I'll be like, why? What's your reason? Not here, no.
Try saying
For
that
that,
to your girlfriend.
for someone to tell you something directly to your face, and for that to be effective, that means they have to have equity in the relationship. If there's no equity in the relationship, that's not going to be effective.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that meaning we have to understand. I'm not saying a stranger cannot be effective. The reason why sometimes strangers' criticism can be effective is because we know for the most part, they're probably coming from an objective perspective, or at least they're out of the picture and they see something. So maybe there's some merit in a stranger giving us some degree of criticism. I'm not saying we're going to fully be receptive to it, but there may be some merit in that criticism because they have no self-interest in the matter. Let's just assume that's the case, right?
I mean, what if the stranger, like, let's say you're having rabbi problems.
Okay.
And the stranger.
Wait, I was getting.
No,
First off,
rabbi
hold on. I've never heard that terminology before. What is
Don't ask me what rabbi problems are.
I don't know. No, man, that doesn't sound good.
And let's say some guy comes up to you and he has a crazy aura, like he looks like a crazy rabbi. What is this?
Okay.
And then he gives you advice. You're not gonna take it.
No.
What?
I want to explain what he said. I want to explain what he said.
I like it.
I want to explain what he said. It's very important. When Some rabbis, I guess, can have, I know a few of them actually, and I walked into the room and you see the light radiating from their face. I've seen that before.
Yeah.
But those very same rabbis oftentimes are not the ones who are just gonna, if you don't come to them with a specific question, they're not just gonna hand you advice unless they can to some degree read your body language and see something is off and then say something to you. That's a whole different reality, right? But what I'm saying is, anytime that does happen, it's a bit of an issue because what the rabbis tell us is aseh lecharab means you need to have a rabbi that knows you, knows your family, knows you very well, knows your strengths, your weaknesses, your shortcomings, know everything about you to a certain extent, and then he can really give you the proper advice based on who you are in relation to the situation that you are in. That's the right thing to do. Randomly going to somebody just because they have powers per se, and I don't really exactly call them powers, but whatever you want to call it, forces, whatever it is, I would be very, very careful with that. There's a saying, those that know don't say, and those that say don't, and those that don't know actually are the ones who say something. So that's typically how it is. But let me kind of take this to the. Anyone wanted to just add something before I take it to the next step? Okay. So let me add this because this is important. We have a rabbi, a big rabbi. His name is the Rambam. Rambam Maimonides, world famous. He wasn't just a Torah scholar. He was a doctor. He was an astronomer. He was a philosopher. He was all the above. And he gives us advice how to properly go and give criticism to somebody. Like, what's the right goal? What's the right path of doing it? Because if we're being honest, oftentimes when a person is going to decide, I'm going to criticize somebody else, oftentimes it's going to be in a situation where maybe they were frustrated and they wanted to unload. So bad situation caught them, something happened, maybe their anxiety was triggered, maybe someone said something to them, maybe they were angry, and maybe things during that day did not go as according to plan, and all of a sudden, when you might get caught in the crossfire or be the punching bag, and all of a sudden they're beginning to unload on you, and you're like, what just happened here? Like, what do you want from me? So that's one form of criticism. It's very common between parents and children. Very common. That's just, I'm saying this so we could be a little bit more forgiving if we were on the punching bag side. Just to understand, when you guys, some of you who have kids or those who will have kids, I am telling you, you will do it too. It's very, very hard not to do that. It's very, very difficult not to do it. So that's one aspect of criticism. That's a type of criticism that it essentially, it's the only objective of it is to just rid yourself of your current frustration. And not only it's ineffective, sometimes it's even harmful. Not only can it backfire, it can also boomerang back at the person. Now, so that's one form of criticism. Another form of criticism is, I don't like the guy, or I don't like the girl. I have a problem with them. Now, I can't say it directly. Can't go, I just don't, I mean, yeah, some people have no filter and they'll say, I just don't like you. Okay, I appreciate that sometimes because at least you know you're dealing with someone who's being straight up with you. They're not two-faced. They'll tell you how it is. Okay, fine. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, but there's something where maybe we can appreciate in that as well. The rabbis say this about Yosef and his brothers. The rabbis say that the brothers of Joseph could not speak to him peacefully. They cannot communicate with him, right? Why? Because, so the rabbis say, they could not, their mouth and their heart were consistent. So if their heart felt something, right, they were not fake. So the rabbis praised them for it. Now, was it the best approach? Probably not. Which from here you see, if you want to talk to somebody, if oftentimes the person needs to be reasonable, but if you want to achieve some sort of a reasonable agreement with somebody, communication is the starting point. If you can't communicate with someone, you won't be able to get to any form of agreement, or you would not be able to get on the same page with them. So that's another form of criticism. I want to tell you what Maimonides writes, because the way he words it is very interesting. Because there's two things to learn about criticism when it comes to how he phrases it. And he says like this. He writes this in Mishnah Torah in Ilchot De'ot in Perek Vav, Halacha Zayin. I learned this from my rabbi, this Rambam. Haroeh havero shechata. If you see your fellow Jew doing a sin, What do I mean by doing a sin? It could be a sin between him and God, but it can also be a sin between him and a fellow Jew, and also a sin between him and himself, right? So drugs, alcohol, doing things that just are really not good for the person, or how they communicate to other people, if they communicate in a very filthy way, in a disrespectful tone, etc. Right? And also between him and God, doing certain things that maybe, make God look bad. Whatever it is, in the relationship itself. So you see your friend doing a sin. Or you see your friend going in a path, right, that is harmful to them. Mitzvah lahziro lamutar. We have a mitzvah, we have a commandment. What's that commandment? This is the most important thing here. Is lahziro lamutar. I need to make sure I bring them back to the path of righteousness. What do I mean by righteousness? Not limiting to just between us and God, between us and ourselves, and us and other people. My obligation in the criticism is one thing and one thing only. What's the end goal? What's the bottom line? I gotta make sure I put him on the path on the right path. And that's my job in the criticism. That's the goal. That's the bottom line. That's the end goal. Which means, if I'm going to say something negative to somebody, I'm going to criticize somebody. If I know that they're not going to take it well, should I say something or not say something? I shouldn't say something. Because what's the end goal? I gotta make sure they're on the right path. The rabbis also tell us this in a different way. Just like there's a mitzvah to say something, there's also a mitzvah not to say something. And that's something that comes with a lot of weight. I'm not saying it's easy to determine. At the end, the bottom line is, whatever I'm going to say or do, is it going to bring a person, is it going to put him on the right path? If the answer is yes, fine. If the answer is no, don't say anything. Because you'll do a lot more harm than good. What you have to consider is sometimes our intentions are good, but we also need to understand that the other side may not comprehend that our intentions are actually good, that we mean well. Especially if in their mind they think we have a problem with them. They think we don't like them. So essentially, although we mean well, but we're just reinforcing the feelings that they had, right, towards us by just giving them criticism. So it comes out that you want to say something to somebody, there's a way to do it. The goal is, how do I bring them on the right path? Now, Maimonides, he doesn't stop there. How could you possibly do that? Because if you have no equity, very unlikely you'll be influential in the friendship, or to any person. If you have no equity, it's not going to get anywhere. If you have equity, well, how should you use that equity in the relationship? How should you actually take advantage of it, right, to help the other side? If I would, before giving this answer, I would like to know from the crowd, and I mean this generally, and ask this question often. Did anyone here ever change because someone criticized him directly, precisely, head on?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
It depends on the person. Yeah.
Okay. Can I get examples of someone getting criticized and it was effective?
Constructive criticism?
I mean, that's a specific example. That's true.
At the gym.
Huh?
At the gym.
From an influential person.
Okay.
You're out in someone's farm. You
Okay.
tell them they're doing it wrong.
Okay. Can I get another example? It's like, for me, that example is if my collar was like this, right, and I walked in, and someone came in who has like OCD, you'd just be like, let me get you right here, you know? I'm talking about when it's something that's a lot, that there's emotion over there, there's baggage.
Work ethic.
Okay, give me an example. I want an actual example where someone criticized you for something and it was very significant and you changed because they criticized you.
An influential person. Somebody you look up to.
Okay, someone that you look up to.
A mentor.
A mentor, fine. You know what I find in successful mentors? They don't often criticize. They rarely criticize. Which makes them very, very effective. Unless you go to them and ask about something. Very effective mentors understand that them criticizing you directly or calling you out directly is not a very effective way to bring about changing. Just pay very close attention. Someone was here a mentor. I have a couple. Rarely do they ever criticize me. In the back, did anyone ever criticize you where Because last time I checked, when you get criticized for something that you're sensitive about, something very specific, last time I checked, they criticize you, you're very well aware of what your shortcomings are. As adults, we're aware. And I want to tell you something. Little children, they know exactly their shortcomings as well. We think a child doesn't know. Oh no, a child knows. Child knows. Right.
Honest people.
For sure. And I experience it almost every day. And I get called out a lot. And I deserve to be sometimes. And I see it. But I'm saying is, anybody who ever came to you, and just think about it deeply, came at you in a way just to criticize you, it's oftentimes not effective. But I will tell you what is effective. It's not my words, it's my Mandi's words. What is effective is as follows. My Mandi says...
Well, your actions?
What?
Your actions?
No. My Mandi says the following. We have a mitzvah to criticize. What's the mitzvah? Hocheach tocheach et amitecha. Lo tisna et achicha v'lovecha. Do not hate your brother in your heart. Hocheach tocheach et amitecha v'lo tisa alav chet. You should, if you see someone doing something wrong, you have the obligation to criticize them. Now, my Mandi says, you know what's the most effective way to do it? You want to talk to somebody, you want to give criticism? He says the following like this. He says, after he says, the mitzvah lahziro lamutav, and this is the next part. Ulhodi'o shu hote al atzmo. That you have to, the word lada'at, in Hebrew we have different ways to understand different levels of perception. The word chokhmah, which means hacha, means someone gives you, let's say, simple instructions. They tell you, you buy something from IKEA, you follow the instructions. Hopefully you didn't skip steps, but you go in and you build it. Not a problem. Follow the instructions. But that's simple level of chokhmah. Then you have bina. Bina is I have the ability to infer or derive one thing from another. Women are very good. They have the ability to understand that. So when they read, let's say they read a person, they can tell you something is sneaky about this person. Because there's something in their behavior that triggered their ability to grasp that something is off. They can see, they can sense it. They took one thing and they're able to learn from that one thing several other things. That's bina. And then you have da'at. Da'at is the highest form of knowledge one can attain, which is that your mind and your heart and your awareness are one and the same. And that's the highest level. That Chabad, every time you guys go to Chabad, the word Chabad, Chet Bet Dalet, it's a combination of these words, Chokhmah, Bina, V'Da'at. Da'at is oneness. There's a sense of oneness that you have within yourself, within your heart, your mind, your spirit, and you understand things deeply. You're one with it. So the Rambam uses a very interesting word. He says that Lahziro lamutab vulhodi'o, which means it comes to the word lada, to know, shu hote al atzmo, that he is sinning unto himself. What does that mean that a person is sinning unto himself? The goal is that if you want to criticize somebody, you have to make them aware that whatever they're doing is not good for them. That's the goal. That they need to get to the realization themselves, the oneness, their mind, their heart, and soul. They need to understand that whatever they're doing, it's not good for them. If you want to achieve bringing them back and putting them on the right path, they need to know that. So which means we can pay lip service all day long. Right? Meaning a mother can tell a child to clean the room, clean the room, clean the room, clean the room. He doesn't care, he's not going to clean the room. The moment the child understands, wait a second, it's not good for me to have a messy room because I lose all my belongings because and it holds me back in many different situations. Once he comes to that realization, once he has a direct experience with that, then he says, wait a second, now there is something here. Because obviously our parents love us, they'll give us criticism, but we also know whatever they do tend to criticize us for, which repeats itself, is the very thing that's really ineffective in how they do it. I actually went very rudely to one of my parents when I was a bit younger, and they criticized me for something. And they were right. They were definitely right for criticizing me for something, no question. And I said to them, you've been criticizing me for these X amount of years, and you're right, but maybe try a different approach. Maybe that would be a little bit more effective. I said it in a respectful way, but I said, you tried, it didn't work, maybe a different approach would be more effective. Which comes out anytime you're having a conversation, anytime you're talking, you're perceiving something, you're experiencing something, you have to come to the realization that A, am I helping the person get on the right path? And B, the way to do it is I need to make sure that they understand it's not good for them. Not only can we not control people, we cannot control the results of what comes out of people's mouth, and we cannot, and we as much as we try, there's a reality in which a person is going to become independent. And now in relationships, there's a power dynamic. So it could be in a relationship, sometimes in any relationship, one person is doing something, because it's the hierarchy of the relationship. But over time, that hierarchy either will dissipate or it will no longer apply. Whether they've grown older or maybe the relationship is no longer the same. But over time, anytime you want to communicate, you have to understand that what it is that I'm saying to somebody else, is it going to help them or not? Am I going to put them on the right path? Are they going to realize that what they're doing is bad for them? Which comes out.
Wouldn't that be considered guidance more than criticism?
So it is definitely guidance for sure. It is for sure guidance. The problem is I think this was said before from a few people, the word constructive criticism, just because the adjective constructive is there, that doesn't mean it's guidance. A lot of times we think, oh, what I'm saying is good for the person. Because I realize they're doing something wrong, let me go and correct their behavior. We can't correct anybody's behavior. And we cannot, there is an aspect where you can guide someone. You know when you can guide someone? When they come to you. But you can't, if we think we can guide someone when they don't come to us, you can't really do that. It's not something we can do. What you can do is provide them with a perspective that they were not aware of, and then let them make that decision.
Right, I just feel like, I don't know, for me personally, criticism kind of has almost like a negative connotation to it. You know?
It does. And by the way, it absolutely does. And the reason why it has a negative connotation, the rabbis say the following, they say, Al tochiach letz pen yasni'eka. Do not criticize a scoffer, who is someone who is, they make fun of Torah, they make all these, they look down upon. Do not criticize a scoffer. Why? Because they're going to come and hate. They're going to come to hate you. Criticism has a very negative connotation. But I'll tell you this: anybody that did give you any form of guidance or any form of you might have perceived as constructive criticism, you never actually saw it as criticism. The way we perceived it is, no, the person actually cares about me and they love me. So we never see it as criticism. We see it as what they're doing is they're making me realize that what I'm doing is not good for me, and it's worth it for me to actually bring about change for myself. But I never perceived it as criticism, because criticism, unfortunately, does not have any positive connotation to it.
Correct.
And that's why. But it's the perception of the other side. What is the relationship about? Now, why am I saying this to you guys? We were trying to understand before. We said the Jewish people did not criticize one another. Last time I checked, there's no shortage of criticism, and it's perfectly acceptable not to criticize based on what we're saying. No, what we're saying is like this. The Jews, they did criticize one another back then. But the difference is they never criticized with the intention on putting their fellow Jew on the right path. Either they were doing it to unload their negative emotions and their frustrations, their moment, or they did it because they never really liked the person. And that's why they never, because the goal of criticism is I gotta make sure my fellow Jew is on the right path. That's the ultimate goal of criticism. And if you so sure you want to give criticism to somebody, you really want to say something that bothers you, ask yourself, if it was the other way around, how would I want someone to approach me? How would I want them to talk to me? In what way? In front of people? Probably not. So maybe we shouldn't do it in front of people. If someone, for example, I'll give this example, if someone has, I don't know, bad breath, and in front of people, yo, you got, your breath, it stinks, it's awful. Now, that may be true, but what you're doing is, what are you showing the person? That not only you don't care about them, you're very focused on yourself, and you don't mind belittling them, making them feel very uncomfortable, right? Or what you could do is just take them on the side, or give them a little whisper, or let them know, do something like that. That is something where you're showing the other person, hey, listen, there's a bit of a problem here, go do something, go drink something, whatever it is. at least what you're showing the other person is, I don't want you to experience this embarrassment, and I don't want you to be perceived negatively by others. That is something that shows I genuinely care about the other side. Someone want to say something? Yeah.
I wanted to say, like, that's like criticizing someone, but that's like publicly like embarrassing.
It is.
too.
You know people do that, unfortunately.
Nah, that's
It is messed up. But and it's not just that. It's in a lot of public settings. For some reason, people are under the impression that if I bring somebody down, if I do it publicly, maybe it gives them some degree of. It's like they don't care. Give them some degree of they feel good with themselves. When in reality, the opposite is very much. It does actually a lot of damage.
It makes them seem better.
Huh? It does make them seem better.
Okay, so what about nowadays? Everybody's self, nobody wants to hear anybody from anything from anybody.
well, that's hat.
So now,
This is the
He asked anybody, has
generation.
constructive criticism ever help you? The whole room says.
Jonathan was saying today everybody is soft, right? Everybody's very very sensitive. And how do you talk to somebody? How do you come and say something to somebody? So what I was getting to before, and I think this is very very important. Anytime you want to say something to somebody, right? Something like the example gave before, they're not aware of, that's fine.
Also, it seems like back in the day, they didn't know what they were doing either.
Why?
Corbin Bizarreta,
Tell me more.
Rabbi Akiva's times.
Be specific. What do you mean they don't know what they're doing?
They didn't have, we were talking yesterday about basic station, right?
Right.
Okay, so all these things are linked. If you don't know how to respectfully, constructively
Communicate to someone?
Communicate to somebody, then, and it seems like they haven't been able to get it down for generations, not just now. Back
So-
in the days, they weren't able to tell somebody else.
So what
Directly and fix it.
so it's true. What you're saying, there is the part of the biggest problem of what we experience is that by the second destruction, there was a lot of the level of religious practice was extremely high. Little kids understood the highest level of Torah you can imagine possible. That falsely gave them security that God would not react to us. It gave them a false sense of security. There sometimes when you're very, I would say, immersed in God per se, God, and you forget that there's human beings, you can engage in that behavior because you're very much looking to correct other people based on what you think God wants you to do, not what God actually wants you to do, but you think God wants you to do. That's why sometimes you have a problem. You have people who are, you have it on both sides of the aisle, but they try to impose religion on other people, and then you have those who are extremely secular and they try to impose secularism on people who are religious. You have it on both sides today. That's part of the problem. It's a human condition that we need to address in itself. What the bottom line is, at the end of the day, is we need to realize people are intelligent and they have the ability to realize when they're doing something wrong. Someone can have an awful habit and repeat it a million times. They know about the habit. You'll be a lot more effective, not in saying, hey, you should work on this, or why you like this. You've been trying so hard, it's not working for you. You could say these comments. Are you actually effective? No. Are you helpful? No. You're not. There are different ways in which you can actually help somebody. That you can give them an insight or recognize, I've realized that you engage in this habit when you do X and Y and Z. So maybe look into that. Maybe that could be helpful to you. That's a very different perspective. Because now you're very much invested in helping the person because you're trying to be insightful. You're actually analyzing their behavior. You're trying to contribute to their struggle, right? Which comes out like this. Why am I talking about this now, specifically? The way we do things and see things starts from inside out. Which means, if I bring this back to myself, if I criticize myself often, if I use the wrong words, the wrong terminology, I belittle myself, I always say things that are negative about myself, what do you think is going to happen? I'm going to do it outwardly on other people because I do it to myself. And everybody has their list of imperfections and things they want to work on. That's fine. But the more you do it to yourself, the more it's also gonna, unfortunately, it's overflow into other people. And so it comes out that when you do speak to yourself or think about yourself, you have to find ways, what can I do to help myself get on the right path? What can I do to make myself become aware that what I'm doing is not good for me? We have a rabbi, his name is the Ramchal. The Ramchal writes that it's called the chapter of Zehirut, where a person is, it's a chapter of contemplation. Now it's very easy, it's very difficult to do this. Technically it's easy to do, but it's very difficult to actually put it in practice. To just contemplate a couple of minutes a day about your day, about what you've done, about your work, just to think, just 2-3 minutes. And he writes, in fact, the power of the evil inclination, the power of the Yetzer Hara, is to preoccupy us as much as possible. So we don't give a minute or 2 minutes a day to just contemplate what can we do to further better ourselves. He writes this time and time again, preoccupying. The fact that we're all preoccupied, the fact that there's always something to do, right? That we're always on the go, is something that's actually, it's a weapon of the Yetzer Hara, because real progress, this is where Shabbat is so fascinating. Shabbat comes in where, yeah, there's an aspect where you're disconnected from reality because you're supposed to take that time for yourself and your family. So being disconnected from social media, being disconnected from the news, that in itself, that time that you have is so valuable because you can actually contemplate. Yeah, eat, drink, go to Beit Knesset, sing songs, hang out with friends. But the beauty of Shabbat is that you have the real opportunity to contemplate. In fact, the biggest rabbis that we have in the last millennia, and even those before, always contemplated about their day, always thought about, how did my day go? What can I do better? And by the way, it's not limited to this, the spiritual side. Even in business, if you read a lot about business personalities, these people oftentimes measure themselves, measure their time, measure how productive they are. It's a common denominator just across all human beings. So this is where I say, take a moment to contemplate, especially this time period, especially the time period. What's so sad about Tisha B'Av, I'll tell you, in our time more than ever, is we don't realize that what it means to have this distance from God. We once had a sense of closeness to Hashem, where we had real clarity, where we had real understanding, where we were able to emotionally and mentally able to ascend to much greater heights. The problem with sin and the problem with baseless hatred is it's not so much as the punishment itself, it's the distance from Hashem, the distance from God that causes the problem. That we become so distant from Him, we don't feel Him, we don't experience Him, we don't understand Him. That's the issue with sin. That's the issue with baseless hatred. Because there's no reality where where you have parents and they're perfectly acceptable if their children don't speak. There's the reality. It's impossible. I know of cases. I know of a case that I'm personally sad about where someone passed away that I know very recently, and the father and son were not talking. It's something where none of it is actually worth it. So from inside out, when you look at yourself from inside out, if you're negative, if you say negative things about yourself, that's not an effective way to put yourself on the right path. What you have to do is make yourself aware of what is, and then work through that. Contemplate. You'll come to. The Ramchal writes that if you contemplate, you will get help from Shamayim. The heavens are going to help you because you're strategizing. Anytime you're strategizing, you're guaranteed. Yes, you're praying, but if you strategize, if you just take a moment to think, anybody does this, even 2-3 minutes a day, if one thing you want to improve on, just one thing, just think about it, you will get help. You will figure it out. Obviously, if you couple that with prayer, I think it's the ultimate recipe for you guys to succeed. Which comes out the next part. So if I do this with myself, then I'm going to be very careful how I do it with other people. And if I do it with other people, I'm also going to be careful how I am with Hashem, with my relationship with God in itself. Which means I'm going to be able to if I want something from God, I'll learn the craft of communication. I'll learn what to say, how to say. If something is off between me and Hashem, I'm not going to pray, hey, give it to me, God. God, give it to me, give it to me, give it to me. It's not a relationship of just giving. I'm going to learn how to communicate to God, in which, can you grant me those things for those reasons? I think it's going to help me be a better person, etc., etc. So that's where it becomes so valuable. You know, Moshe Rabbeinu, I'm going to finish with this. Moshe Rabbeinu, when he was talking to God at the burning bush, Moshe Rabbeinu tells the following thing to God. ויאמר משה אל אדוני, בי אדוני לא איש דברים אנוכי. I'm not a man of words, he tells him. He tells God, I'm not a man of words. I stutter, right? ערל שפתיים, I can't communicate properly. That's why Aaron did most of the talking in front of Paro. This week's parasha is parashat Devarim. Let me read you the pasuk. אלה הדברים אשר דיבר משה אל כל ישראל. In Tziat Mitzrayim, right before he says, I'm not a man of words. And now Moshe is saying, I am a man of words. What changed? What made Moshe Rabbeinu a man of words? And by the way, when he was speaking about this, you know what he was saying? He was communicating to the Jewish people about their sins. Do you know how he did it? He didn't do it in a direct way. All he did is he discussed he reminded he told the people where he was talking, and he's saying, I'm standing here and I'm speaking in front of, he was saying, through the wilderness, in a place called Arabah, I'm near Arabah, I'm between Paran and Tofel. I'm standing here between all these locations. Why are you giving us your coordinates? Like, why do we care? All these locations were locations where the Jewish people sinned. He never said it directly to them because he wanted to preserve their dignity. They already realized how much wrong they did. He just spoke about the locations. And the locations was a hint enough for them to understand what they did wrong. So he never did it directly, because he wanted to preserve their dignity. Because if you're going to attack someone's dignity, you lose them. You're not going to get anywhere. But what changed? How was Moshe a man of words? Before he wasn't a man of words, now he's a man of words. So the rabbis tell us it's because he merited to have the Torah. The Torah is such a fascinating thing that a 7-year-old can read a verse and a 77-year-old can read the same exact verse, and there's a ton of wisdom in it. For the 77-year-old, there's one level of wisdom, and for the 7-year-old, there's another level of wisdom. The Torah is so complex, so esoteric, yet so simple. It has the ability to communicate things to us in the ways in which we can understand it. Moshe Rabbeinu struggled with that in the beginning. That after receiving the Torah, the rabbis tell us that the Jews were healed. But what do you mean? There were someone who was lame was no longer lame, someone who was deaf was able to hear, someone who was blind was able to see, someone who maybe was stuttered or was mute was able to communicate and speak. That was one form of physical healing. But also, what God did when we got the Torah, He also healed us on an emotional and mental level. Because we were essentially slaves. That came with a lot of baggage. And He healed us, and when He did it, right, and Moshe Rabbeinu was to some degree part of that healing. But he merited the Torah. The more you learn the beauty, the wisdom of Torah, this is one of the strongest arguments how the Torah is so divine. Any history that a person wants to get a PhD in history, or you want to study history in college, in middle school, whatever level of history you want to study, you need to have maybe new text. You need to have maybe some sort of archaeological evidence. You need to have different levels of things to kind of make it new again. Maybe take it to the next level, your level of history knowledge in the Torah. The more you study it, every year we read the same parasha again and again, and the same pasuk again and again, and there's brand new insights every single time. That's the eloquence of Torah. And the more we do it, the more we're going to learn how ourselves have to communicate, not just to ourselves, but to also other people. So remember this, the goal, anytime with other people, if I don't like a person, and I want to criticize them, I probably should not be doing that. I should probably check myself why I don't like the person. And there's ways in which we can go on about it to try to fix it, but ultimately, I want to be able to, the goal is if I criticize somebody, is I got to make sure that they get on the right path. And for me to do that, I got to make sure that they understand that what they're doing is not good for themselves. Once we do it with ourselves, we will do it with other people. And that's one of the ways in which we can slowly but surely remove animosity we have towards one another and hopefully increase in Ahavat Hinam. Are there any questions? Yeah.
So maybe you answered this and I missed it, but I understand the intention of you want to criticize to place somebody on the right path, right? Not just like judge or anything, but how would I know that what I think is the right path that they should go on is correct?
That's a very intelligent question. Everybody heard that question? So it's not for us to determine what's the right path for them. That's where we want to criticize. I know what the right path is for this person and that person. I don't. They themselves know what the right path is for them. I could just make them aware of what I see from the side, or the perspective that I have from their behavior, or what surrounds them. Provided that if someone comes to you, you become effective. If you just offer it, you're probably not effective. But let's assume they do come to you and they do want that perspective. Is you can't tell them exactly what to do, or this is the right person for you, or not the right person for you. They need to come to that realization themselves. We can push somebody. A lot of times people come and they're not willing to take responsibility for their actions, and they want you to tell them what to do. You can't do that. They themselves need to take responsibility for their actions, and I'm saying this to myself also. Anytime you want to get advice from somebody, a lot of times you just either you want them to tell you what you already want to hear and you can move forward with it, or you're generally interested as give me their perspective. But at the end of the day, you got to take responsibility. Even if your rabbi tells you to do something, you got to take responsibility for that, and you got to do it and see it through all the way. Because we can point fingers left to right, but at the end of the day, we got to take responsibility for anything that we do. So to get to crux of what you're saying is, I may think this is the right thing for them, and that could be true. It could be the right thing for them. At the end of the day, I have to present it in a way from them where they need to make that decision that it is right for them. Otherwise, I cannot do it for them. They need to do it for themselves. And that's when the Maimonides says that lo di'ol shehata al atzmo, he needs to realize it's not, wherever he's at is not good for him. That's the realization.
So would the intention still be good if, instead of knowing like what's the right path, right, because we wouldn't want to push them on what we think is right, if you feel that they're on the wrong path, to at least help them make themselves aware of it?
So that's the goal. Make him aware of it. Make him become aware of it, but not, when I say make them become aware of it, is obviously not threatening them and not imposing your will onto them. Is they have to have this intellectual or ladat, this oneness, this where they fully grasp this is the right thing. And that once they know it, I know all the changes that I was able to make in my life came from that. And a change that lasts, not change that's momentary, because people can change, but will that change actually last? Did it actually take effect? Did it actually bring about something that is meaningful to you? That's the actual thing. I have to, it's not good for me.
I have an uninvolved question.
Go for it. I hope my answer is a little more involved than your uninvolved questions.
I wanted to know if religion is effort-based or it's, I don't know how else to say it, than like a point system. Like, for example, someone could be born into a religious family and it's easy for them to be religious, it's easy for them to learn Torah every day because they lived in it, they grew up in it.
Right.
The effort is not the same as someone who may not be even close to as religious but puts all his effort into
What do you
being
think
more
the answer
religious.
is?
I think it's effort based, but a lot of people preach things as if it's not.
You're absolutely right. Because if you came down to this world with a specific status, let's call it, right? And you can only be measured based on your current reality that you're in, the family you were born to, your level of intellect and wisdom, and your level of character, and the good things and the bad things. Everything collectively everything is going to be measured according to what you can do at the moment. Forget what you could have done. Forget what you can do in the future. What could you do right here, right now?
Right, but
That's the effort at the moment.
To argue the other side, most people can just wake up today and choose to do all the right things according to religion and to learn and to devote their life to it. You have the physical ability to do it.
I don't fully agree.
In the most part, most people could do that, but
You know what? Maybe you're right. But how long is that going to last? We just talked about change that can actually last. How long? One second. But how long is that going to last? And if you literally take someone and you take them.
there are a lot of people that woke up one day and just decided and never stopped.
So I want to tell you, it's a common misconception On the outside, it looks like it, but for probably many, many months before it, they were pondering it. They were thinking it. Has anyone here seen someone who's very religious on the outside, black, white, beard, 3 months later, shaved, looking very different, maybe even has an earring? Anyone ever seen something like that before?
Yeah.
That drastic, how could that happen? That's the same, I'm just doing on the flip side, it's the
Right.
same exact thing. That, as human beings, it's very difficult for us to be very drastic without pondering something or thinking about it or living that reality in our mind. Because the change, the drastic change, it really, really affects us. And so, and that's why in their mind, they may, on the outside, they look like one thing, but in their mind, the well is dry. They're not, that energy is not there, that connection is no longer there. And so by the time they remove whatever they're wearing into their second clothing, they're already living that reality in their mind. And where did I know this from? The rabbis say that "En adam choteh ela nichnas beruach shtut." A person does not sin unless a foolish spirit has entered them. Which means, enter, that means in their mind, it's already there, it's already cooking, it's brewing in their mind, and they're already thinking about the reality. Anytime a person wants to do a sin, and a person understands it's a sin, you know it's a sin, in your mind, a person already played the sin in their mind. It was there before even they were actually doing the sin. That's how they got to the sin themselves. Same thing with anything else. A person can become that, but there has to be a brewing process. It takes time for it to actually take place within the person. It's not an overnight thing, and even if it is, these things don't tend to last. It's not real change for the most part, unless they go through something traumatic. You know,
And how do you say that to someone who is like a tzaddik and does all these things, and it's easy for them because they grew up in it and they did it their entire lives?
it's not easy for them. You should know.
And
It looks like it, but it's not. But go on. I'll tell you in a second why. Go on.
it's debatable if it's the only thing. For example, like the people from the time of the Bet Mikdash, they didn't have the thought of being non-religious. You said even a little kid had the full Torah knowledge that he would needed to have.
Correct.
Meaning it was easy for them. Meaning it was life for them, and then they messed up by judging and whatever.
Yeah. So regarding that, you'll be surprised how there are some people here in the crowd that are religious from birth, and they can tell you they have phases where their energy level or their excitement about being religious runs very low at times. In fact, it becomes very robotic and mundane, and maybe even boring. I'm being very honest with you. And they find new ways to reinvigorate themselves. They find new ways to reconnect again and again. They have that struggle. Oftentimes, those that do tshuva, who are not religious, who become religious, it's like they have this autopilot fire within them for years. That's something that people religious, oftentimes, they don't have it because they were born into it. This is something,
that's what I was saying.
right, this is born into it, but you'll be surprised that they have the struggles. Wherever they're holding, they'll be measured by their effort. Wherever the less religious holding, they'll be measured by their effort. Because it's not a fair game, it's not a fair judgment. Because they're not starting from the same place. So all you can do to make it a fair judgment is measure them based on their effort. And not measure them based on anything else.
Well said.
Also, what you're born into has nothing to do with spirituality and religion. It has everything to do with culture. Everybody in the community does something, and this is how we move.
Right, exactly. If
So
you're
it's
not
easy for
accustomed
them. They
to
just do that
if you're not accustomed
without-
to
with a
anything
lack of
opposite,
meaning. They do it with a lack of meaning.
right? That's
Then
what
when you
I'm
don't
saying.
have a meaning, the fire burns out quick.
So I'd like to make
No,
it
but
since
that's
I
not-
played soccer, and I always got mad because there would be kids that were prodigies and they would just get on the field and they just were amazing at soccer. And I would wake up in my summer times at 5 a.m., I would go run, I would practice by myself, and I would go practice with my team, and then after that, I would go play with my friends and we would scrimmage. And so playing soccer for me was an effort. It was something that I was so hungry for, that I strived every single day, that I woke up at 5 a.m. as a 15, 16-year-old kid, wanting to be so good at soccer. So I think it's very much the same in Judaism. You have a hunger for it. Like you said, you have a fire that's burning within you. So for kids that wake up as a prodigy, like they just know how to play soccer. It's just so innate. Like there's nothing to it.
Right.
But for someone like me, I had a hunger. I wanted to be like them.
Right. It's a good example, very good example.
But at the end of that game, your coach tells you that you did great and your effort goes a long way. But at the end of the day, the other guy's a better player. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
At the end
This
of
is
the day,
where it's
this guy's
different.
a better player.
You're right.
So they're ranked in different rankings.
Yeah,
By the
but
way-
I think practice makes better.
No, no, no.
Someone who
I'll
just
tell you very
gets on
simple.
the field.
And I mean this sincerely, God is not a flesh and blood coach or any judge for that matter of fact. Because at the end of the day, if you put in your effort accordingly and a religious person did not, you'll have a probably better place today. Because that's what it comes down to. What are they going to say? I did this, okay, but you're born into it. Why should we give you credit for it?
The whole point of criticizing is because you believe he's not on the right path for him, right?
Right.
Okay. So just like me and you believe that God has us in the specific place that we're at in life right now because he wants and needs us to be there, who are we to even think? Even though that person's not doing exactly what we think is correctly, maybe Hashem needs them to be on a certain path to discover new things,
Absolutely.
to bring a new light to the world.
Absolutely.
Right. And to throw in the effort thing, that you can see someone not doing the right thing, but he's putting 100 times more effort to do whatever he is doing than what you're doing with your life. You know, like you shouldn't go around judging other people because you don't know if your criticism is just gonna like make him lose his confidence into what he's doing.
Absolutely, and you're going to affect the person that way. And just the way you said is that's why this is why we shouldn't try to control people because they sometimes need to go through something to bring them to a specific place to come to that level of awareness of understanding.
Any person that started, a lot of people that like a real Baal Tshuva, they grow up religious, then they go totally off, and then they come back.
Right.
Those people always have the crazy stories.
They do.
Rabbi Nachman teaches us that somebody that goes off, every aver that he does, he turns into a zechut, turns into a mitzvah.
Right.
Every single McDonald's cheeseburger that he ate turns into a zechut in his favor because by doing that, being on that path led him eventually to come back.
If he did tshuva from Ahava, yes.
So then really you can never.
If he did tshuva, if he first does tshuva from real love, it's going to convert his sins into merits. That's true. That is true.